On January 18, 2026, 12 F-15E Strike Eagles assigned to the 494th Fighter Squadron at RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom departed their base and headed southeast, supported by KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling aircraft. Their destination was Muwaffaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, a sprawling installation in the desert southeast of Amman that has become one of the most consequential staging points in American military planning. By the time those aircraft landed, they were joining F-15Es already in the region from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina and Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. Within days, that base held approximately 35 F-15E Strike Eagles, one of the largest forward concentrations of the type in years, and more were coming. This was not a routine rotation. This was the visible edge of a massive American military buildup aimed directly at Iran, and the F-15E was at the center of it. The context was a result of years of escalating confrontation between the United States, Israel, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, a confrontation that had passed through several phases of escalation and had now reached its most dangerous point since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. In June 2025, during the 12-day Israel-Iran war, the United States had ordered Operation Midnight Hammer, in which 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers struck Iranian nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Iran retaliated with missile attacks on American positions in the region, including a ballistic missile strike on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar that damaged Aradome. The Trump administration, entering its second term, had imposed maximum pressure sanctions, demanded Iran agree to a new nuclear accord that would prohibit uranium enrichment entirely, and made clear that military options remained fully on the table. As Iranian authorities cracked down violently on mass protests that erupted in late December 2025, killing thousands of citizens in the streets after a sharp collapse of Iran's currency, President Trump told protesters that help was on its way. The military repositioning that followed was not subtle. The United States Air Force was moving its most capable ground attack aircraft into position around Iran's periphery, and the F-15E Strike Eagle was the primary instrument of that posture. The F-15E Strike Eagles deploying to Jordan were equipped with the Eagle Passive Active Warning Survivability System, known as EPAWSS, the most advanced electronic warfare suite ever fitted to the F-15 family. Defense Security Asia reported that the arrival of EPAWSS-equipped F-15ES represented a qualitative shift in the regional balance, as this system enhances survivability against radar-guided threats and the electronic attack environments that Iran had been developing and deploying. These were not the F-15s of the Gulf War era. They were among the most capable strike fighters in the world, and they were positioned within striking range of every significant target in Iran. United States Central Command confirmed the deployment with an official photograph posted to social media on January 20, 2026, stating that the aircraft enhanced combat readiness and promoted regional security and stability. A second wave of 12 more Strike Eagles departed Lakenheath shortly afterward. Reports from tracking data and air traffic control communications indicated those aircraft came from the 4th Fighter Wing at Seymour Johnson, apparently as reinforcement rather than a straightforward rotation, since the Mountain Home aircraft they were nominally replacing showed no signs of returning home. Middle East Forum Analysis in late January 2026 described Muwaffaq Salti Air Base as hosting approximately 35 F-15E Strike Eagles, alongside A-10C Thunderbolt II attack aircraft, supported by a system of KC-135 tankers, creating an air bridge between Jordan and the Gulf region. Patriot and THAAD missile defense batteries had been deployed to protect the growing fleet of aircraft and support personnel at the base. By February 2026, the buildup had accelerated further. Fresh F-35 Lightning IIs and additional F-15E Strike Eagles were arriving at Lakenheath from bases across the continental United States, and a significant number were continuing onward to the region. One squadron of F-15Es from Seymour Johnson and one from Lakenheath's own 48th Fighter Wing were both simultaneously forward deployed. F-22 Raptors from Joint Base Langley Eustis in Virginia were sent directly to Abda Air Base in Israel. Visible and commercial satellite imagery from Chinese company Mizervision, published on February 26, 2026. Dozens of tanker aircraft had been moved to Europe and the Middle East. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group was positioned near the coast of Israel. The USS Abraham Lincoln, embarking F-35Cs, was operating in the waters south of Iran. Air and Space Forces magazine reported that a squadron of F-15Es from Seymour Johnson was deployed alongside Lakenheath's own F-15Es in the Middle East simultaneously, representing an extraordinary forward commitment. Then, on February 28, 2026, the confrontation turned kinetic. The United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated multi-domain precision strike campaign against Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure after Iran fired missiles toward Israeli territory. The Center for Strategic and International Studies reported that targets included command nodes, launch systems, and sensitive enrichment facilities. Subsequent reporting indicated additional strikes on the Iran Atomic Energy Agency headquarters in Tehran, the explosive research testing facility at Parchin, and further strikes at the Isfahan nuclear complex. F-15E Strike Eagles participated in these operations alongside F-35s, F-22s, and naval aviation assets, flying from Muwaffaq Salti and other regional bases. The operation produced at least one verified incident of friendly fire. On March 1, 2026, 3 United States Air Force F-15E Strike Eagles flying in support of Operation Epic Fury went down over Kuwait after being mistakenly engaged by Kuwaiti air defenses during an extremely complex, high-tempo battle space in which Iranian drones, ballistic missiles, and aircraft were simultaneously active. All 6 crew members ejected safely, were recovered, and were in stable condition. The United States Central Command confirmed the incident, and Kuwait acknowledged it. Iran simultaneously claimed to have intercepted an American F-15 violating Iranian airspace near Hormuz Island, but CENTCOM categorically denied this, stating that American fighters had completed more than 8,000 combat flights during Operation Epic Fury with no aircraft shot down by Iran. The F-15E was at the center of the most intense American air campaign in the Middle East in a generation. Qatar's F-15QA fleet, the advanced Eagle variant, also recorded aerial victories during the conflict. On March 2, 2026, Qatari F-15QAs shot down 2 Iranian Air Force Su-24 Mk aircraft that had been dispatched toward Qatar, apparently targeting Al Udeid Air Base and the RAF Lakenheath natural gas processing facility. This brought the overall F-15 family's confirmed air-to-air combat record to 106 victories against 0 losses, counting all operators. The F-15E's role in the Iran confrontation was not new territory. In April 2024, Iran had launched its first-ever direct military attack against Israel, called Operation True Promise, sending more than 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and one-way attack drones simultaneously toward Israeli territory from Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. 2 F-15E Strike Eagle squadrons, the same 494th Fighter Squadron from Lakenheath that deployed to Jordan in January 2026, took down 70 of those drones in a single night. President Biden confirmed afterward that American forces had helped intercept nearly all of the incoming threats. The F-15E achieved those intercepts using AIM-9 Sidewinder infrared-guided missiles and AIM-120 AMRAAM radar-guided missiles, and in some cases, crews attempted to employ laser-guided joint direct attack munition bombs against the drones. The operation demonstrated a capability that had been theoretical for decades. that the F-15E was not just a long-range bomber but a weapons platform versatile enough to conduct large-scale aerial intercept operations against a mass drone and missile attack at night over hostile territory in a multi-nation coordinated defensive operation. That performance defined the F-15E's role in the current standoff and explains why the Air Force moved so quickly and in such force to position those aircraft in Jordan when the situation with Iran escalated again in January 2026. Range, payloads, sensors, crew capacity, and proven combat effectiveness in exactly the threat environment Iran was projecting made the F-15E the natural choice. Its ranges, speeds, weapons payloads, and the power of its radars were, as one defense publication noted, unrivaled within the Western world for a non-stealthy tactical aircraft. The F-15's capabilities, which we will examine in exhaustive detail, made it the natural instrument for this mission. Its range, its payload, the power of its sensors, its ability to carry precision weapons that can penetrate hardened underground targets, and its crew of 2, a pilot and a dedicated weapons systems officer, give it a depth of capability in the strike role that no single-seat aircraft can match. But to understand why this aircraft is here, in this moment, doing this mission, we have to go back more than half a century to where it all began. We have to understand the Vietnam War, the lesson the Air Force drew from it, the engineers and officers who built something in direct response to that lesson, and the journey from a basic air superiority fighter to the most versatile and prolific heavy fighter platform in the history of American military aviation. The F-15 Eagle traces its origins to the most painful lessons of the Vietnam War. In the early 1960s, American military aviation doctrine was built on a foundational assumption that had guided aircraft development for years. That assumption was that the next generation of air combat would be fought at long range, with radar-guided and infrared-guided missiles, making the traditional dogfight obsolete. Guns were relics. Maneuvering was unnecessary. Future fighters would fly fast, detect enemies at long range, and destroy them with missiles before a turning fight could ever develop. The F-4 Phantom, the primary American frontline fighter of that era, was designed without an internal gun for that reason. Its missiles, it was assumed, would do all the necessary killing. That assumption collapsed in Vietnam. The AIM-7 Sparrow radar-guided missile was a complicated weapon with a difficult firing envelope. It required the launching aircraft to maintain its radar continuously aimed at the target throughout the missile's entire flight, which severely constrained the launching aircraft's ability to maneuver after firing. In combat conditions, the AIM-7's actual kill probability was well below what its designers had claimed in testing. The AIM-9 Sidewinder infrared-guided missile was effective at very close range but required specific firing geometries that were difficult to achieve in the chaos of real air combat. Rules of engagement in Vietnam frequently required pilots to visually identify targets before firing, which negated the long-range missile advantage entirely. Enemy fighters had to be close enough to see before weapons could be employed. And the North Vietnamese Air Force, flying MiG-17s and MiG-21s that the American pilots had been told were easily inferior to the F-4, proved willing and able to engage at close range, where the heavy and less maneuverable F-4 was at a serious disadvantage. The MiG-17 in particular was a remarkably agile aircraft inside its flight envelope, and it could turn inside an F-4 with ease. American pilots found themselves in close-range turning fights for which they had not trained, in aircraft that were not optimized for those fights, with missiles that frequently failed to guide. The United States Air Force kill ratio in air-to-air combat over Vietnam was deeply alarming. The experience of combat over North Vietnam was forcing a fundamental reassessment of every assumption that had guided American fighter development for 2 decades. The institutional response began in April 1965. Harold Brown, then Director of Defense Research and Engineering, ordered the Air Force to begin studies of what was called the Fighter Experimental, or FX program. These early studies envisioned a production run of 800 to 1,000 aircraft and emphasized maneuverability over speed. The requirements called for a dedicated air superiority fighter, not a multi-role compromise. The Air Force had not built an aircraft solely designed for air-to-air combat since the F-86 Sabre in the early 1950s. Every aircraft in the inventory since then had been asked to perform multiple missions and had excelled at none of them in the pure air combat role. The FX would be different. It would be designed from the ground up to win in the air. An official requirements document was finalized in October 1965 and sent to 13 companies on December 8 of that year. 8 companies responded. After a series of reviews and down-selection rounds, the Air Force asked 4 companies to develop their concepts further. The competing design teams collectively generated some 500 different configurations in the process of working toward viable proposals. The early proposals were dominated by variable sweep wing designs, reflecting the fashion of the era. Aircraft like the F-111 and the F-14, which were entering development at this time, used variable sweep wings that swept forward for takeoff and low-speed flight and swept back for high-speed dash. When the Air Force studied the initial FX proposals in 1966, the designs were enormous, weighing over 60,000 pounds and featuring top speeds of Mach 2.7 with thrust-to-weight ratios of only 0.75. The Air Force noted with concern that these designs looked uncomfortably similar to the F-111, the massive multi-role aircraft that had been Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara's attempt to force the Air Force and Navy to share a common aircraft. The F-111 had satisfied neither service, was too heavy and too complex, and had produced an aircraft that was too compromised to excel at any single mission. The FX program was reformulated with a harder emphasis on actual air combat performance. Contributing to the urgency of the redesign was a dramatic piece of intelligence that shook American military aviation in 1967. The Soviet Union had unveiled the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-25 Foxbat at the Domodedovo Air Show near Moscow. The Foxbat appeared to be an extraordinary aircraft, with a design suggesting speeds of Mach 3 or beyond and a high-altitude performance that no existing Western fighter could match. American intelligence analysts initially concluded that the MiG-25 must be an extraordinarily capable air combat aircraft, and the prospect of Soviet interceptors that could outrun and outclimb anything the United States could put in the air was alarming. The FX requirements were revised in direct response to this intelligence, demanding a fighter that could counter the apparent performance of the MiG-25. What American intelligence did not yet understand and would not discover until a Soviet pilot defected in a MiG-25 in 1976 was that the aircraft was essentially a specialized reconnaissance and interceptor platform with very limited maneuverability, built with relatively unsophisticated avionics and using stainless steel construction rather than more advanced materials. But in 1967, the MiG-25 drove the FX requirements toward higher performance across the board. In December 1967, concept exploration contracts were awarded to General Dynamics and McDonnell Douglas. The two companies spent the following year developing competing concepts. In March 1968, a formal request for proposals was issued to the broader defense industry, with specifications that were now sharply defined. The aircraft would be a twin-engine, single-seat fighter with an internal cannon. It would have a top speed of at least Mach 2.5. It would have a thrust-to-weight ratio above 1, meaning it could accelerate while pointing vertically. It would have low wing loading, meaning the ratio of the aircraft's weight to its wing area would be low enough to allow it to sustain tight turns without shedding speed. It would carry a multi-mode radar capable of looking down at low-flying targets without being confused by returns from the ground below, a critical capability for engaging enemy aircraft flying at low altitude to evade radar detection. McDonnell Douglas, North American Rockwell, and Fairchild Republic all submitted formal proposals. The evaluations were comprehensive and rigorous. McDonnell Douglas had been studying air superiority fighter concepts since the mid-1960s and had developed a design philosophy that balanced performance, reliability, and the structural robustness that would allow the aircraft to survive the punishment of sustained combat operations. Their design drew on wind tunnel research conducted at NASA's Langley Research Center incorporating a configuration that the NASA researchers had identified as offering excellent transonic maneuvering performance. The large nose diameter accommodated a powerful radar that the Air Force insisted on from the beginning, as radar capability was fundamental to the aircraft's mission of detecting and destroying enemy aircraft at the longest possible ranges. The twin-engine arrangement provided both the necessary thrust and an important safety margin, since the loss of a single engine over hostile territory in a single-engine aircraft typically meant a lost aircraft and a captured or dead pilot. General Dynamics and McDonnell Douglas were awarded system design and development contracts in December 1968 for preliminary designs of the F-15. On December 23, 1969, the Air Force awarded the engineering and manufacturing development contract to McDonnell Douglas. This was done without a competitive fly-off, which drew some criticism from advocates of competitive procurement. Critics worried about cost overruns and program delays of the kind that had plagued other major defense programs. Those concerns proved largely unfounded. The F-15 program became one of the most successfully managed aircraft development programs in Air Force history. McDonnell Douglas delivered the aircraft on time and within budget, a remarkable achievement for a program of this complexity and ambition. The first F-15A prototype, serial number 710280, rolled out at the McDonnell Douglas plant in St. Louis, Missouri on June 26, 1972. The aircraft's design was immediately striking to anyone who saw it. It was large, with a wingspan of 42 feet 8 inches. The twin tails stood tall and distinctive. The enormous fixed-engine inlets on either side of the fuselage were designed to efficiently funnel air to the two Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofan engines across a wide range of flight conditions, including supersonic speeds and extreme angles of attack. The engines were the most powerful turbofans ever fitted to a fighter aircraft at that time. Each produced 23 450 pounds of thrust with afterburner in the F100PW100 variant, and two of them gave the aircraft a thrust-to-weight ratio that exceeded 1 when the aircraft was lightly loaded. The F-15 could climb straight up and accelerate while doing so. No fighter in the world had ever offered that capability. On July 27, 1972, McDonnell Douglas chief test pilot Irving Burroughs took the first F-15A on its maiden flight at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The flight went well, confirming the basic handling qualities and demonstrating the aircraft's fundamental aerodynamic soundness. Testing revealed a few items that required attention during the development phase. The speed brake was enlarged. The horizontal stabilizers received a notched design. Wingtip caps were curved, but the fundamental aerodynamics and powerplant combination proved sound from the beginning. The Air Force used the subsequent years of flight testing to demonstrate the Eagle's performance to both the service and the public, and in doing so created one of the most memorable demonstrations of raw performance capability in aviation history. The Strike Eagle program, using an F-15A stripped of most avionics and unpainted to reduce weight, set 8 time-to-climb world records between January 16 and February 1, 1975. Several of those records had previously been held by the Soviet MiG-25 Foxbat, which was being used in Kremlin propaganda as evidence of Soviet aerospace superiority. The Strike Eagle destroyed that narrative comprehensively. It reached 3,000 meters in about 27 seconds. It reached 6,000 meters in about 38 seconds. It reached 9,000 meters in about 48 seconds. In its most dramatic run, the Strike Eagle pulled 4 grams into a 60-degree climb, accelerated to twice the speed of sound, and reached an altitude of 98,425 feet, just under 30 kilometers above the Earth, in only 3 minutes, 27.8 seconds from brake release. It beat the Saturn V moon rocket's time to 50,000 feet by 10 seconds. That was not a propaganda exercise. It was a statement about what American aerospace engineering had achieved. 12 full-scale development aircraft were built and used to test every aspect of the design at Edwards Air Force Base. On November 14, 1974, President Gerald Ford presided over a ceremony at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. where the Tactical Air Command and the 555th Tactical Fighter Training Squadron took delivery of the first operational F-15A. In January 1976, the first tactical fighter wing at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia became the first operational combat wing to receive F-15A and F-15B aircraft, converting from the F-4 Phantom. The following year, the 36th Tactical Fighter Wing at Bitburg Air Base in Germany became the first overseas unit to receive the Eagle, placing the aircraft on the front line facing the Soviet Union in Central Europe. The aircraft that entered service was unlike anything the Air Force had operated before. It was faster, more maneuverable, and better armed than its predecessors. Its radar was more capable than anything previously fielded on an American fighter. And critically, it was built from the ground up to do one thing supremely well: find and destroy enemy aircraft in the air. Now we must examine what the F-15 actually is, technically and physically. The engineering that went into this aircraft is not merely impressive in isolation. It explains why, more than 50 years after that first flight at Edwards, the Eagle and its derivatives are still the cornerstone of American heavy air power in the most dangerous theater in the world. The F-15 is a twin-engine, all-weather air superiority fighter designed for a no-compromise approach to aerial combat effectiveness. The original F-15A and F-15B were single-seat and two-seat variants respectively, both optimized for the pure air superiority mission. The F-15A was, from the beginning, a revelation of aerodynamic and propulsive design philosophy. Everything about it was oriented toward giving the pilot energy and the ability to exploit it. The fundamental aerodynamic concept centers on a high thrust-to-weight ratio combined with low wing loading. These two parameters together determine what a fighter can do in combat more than any other factors. Wing loading is the ratio of the aircraft's weight to its wing area. A fighter with low wing loading, meaning a large wing relative to its weight, can generate high lift forces at lower speeds, allowing it to sustain tighter turns without losing speed. The F-15's wing area is 608 square feet, and at combat weights, the wing loading can be as low as approximately 55 pounds per square foot. This is significantly lower than many of the Soviet fighters it was designed to defeat. The MiG-23 Flogger, for example, had higher wing loading that constrained its sustained turn performance. In a maneuvering engagement, an aircraft with lower wing loading can maintain tighter turns for longer, which is decisive at the margins of combat. The thrust-to-weight ratio describes how much thrust the engines produce relative to the aircraft's weight. A ratio above 1 means the aircraft has more thrust available than its weight, allowing it to accelerate in any flight attitude including vertical climbs. The F-15's two F-100 engines, producing a combined 50,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner in the PW-100 variant, gave an aircraft weighing approximately 48,000 pounds in a nominal combat loading a thrust-to-weight ratio of approximately 1.04. As the aircraft burns fuel and becomes lighter during a mission, this ratio improves further. At low combat weights, the static thrust-to-weight ratio could reach approximately 1.35 or better. No aircraft of the era could match this, and very few fighters in the world today can exceed it. The wing planform is a modified cropped delta shape with a leading edge sweep angle of 45 degrees. The airfoil thickness ratio varies from 6% at the root to 3% at the tip, providing low drag at high speeds while maintaining adequate lift characteristics across the flight envelope. Ailerons and simple high-lift flaps are located on the trailing edge. The designers made a deliberate decision not to incorporate leading-edge maneuvering flaps or complex variable geometry systems. This was possible because the combination of low wing loading and the fixed conical camber along the leading edge, which varies with span-wise position, was sufficient to maintain adequate low-speed performance and high angle of attack handling without the added complexity, weight, and maintenance demands of variable geometry systems. The twin vertical tails provide directional stability during aggressive yaw and roll inputs, and together with the large horizontal stabilators, they give the pilot exceptional control authority across the entire flight envelope. The oversized control surfaces were deliberately designed to allow rapid aileron rolls, tight turns, and abrupt pitch changes without the aircraft departing controlled flight. This control authority is what allows trained pilots to sustain the 9G maneuvering load that the airframe is rated for without immediately losing control. The fuselage itself generates meaningful lift, particularly at moderate to high angles of attack. This lifting body effect means the entire aircraft contributes to the sustained turn capability rather than just the wings. The cockpit is designed around a single governing principle: give the pilot complete situational awareness and the ability to manage every critical system without looking away from the fight. The large one-piece canopy provides exceptional visibility to the sides and rear. The heads-up display projects flight and weapons data onto the windscreen in the pilot's forward line of sight, allowing continuous eyes-out scanning while receiving all necessary tactical information. The cockpit arrangement follows the hands-on throttle and stick, or HOTAS, philosophy, placing all critical weapons and systems controls directly on the throttle and control stick. A pilot engaged in a high-G turning fight with an enemy aircraft can select weapons, release chaff and flares, and manage radar modes without removing hands from the flight controls. This sounds like a small thing, but in combat, where fractions of a second matter and where high G-forces make deliberate reaching movements difficult, HOTAS is a critical operational advantage. The F-15C and F-15D, which entered service beginning in 1979, represented significant improvements over the original F-15A and B. The production Eagle package, designated PEP 2000, added 2,000 pounds of additional internal fuel through new tank volumes in the leading and trailing edges of the wings. It added provisions for the conformal fuel tanks, initially called fast packs, standing for fuel and sensor, tactical, which could be attached to the sides of the engine air intakes to carry an additional 750 gallons of fuel each without consuming the underwing storage stations. The maximum takeoff weight was increased to 68,000 pounds. The landing gear was strengthened to handle this increased weight. A new digital central computer was installed. The overload warning system was upgraded, and the G-envelope software was revised to allow pilots to sustain 9 grams at all weights, an important improvement since F-15A pilots had effectively been limited to lower G-loads under some conditions. The F-15C also received the upgraded Pratt & Whitney F100PW220 engine, which provided digital electronic engine controls that dramatically improved throttle response, reduced wear, and lowered fuel consumption compared to the original F100PW100. Each PW220 produced 14,670 pounds of dry thrust and 23,830 pounds with afterburner. More critically, the digital engine controls eliminated the problems of compressor stalls and slow throttle response that had plagued the F100 PW100 in certain flight conditions, particularly during rapid throttle movements in a maneuvering engagement. The PW220 was simply more reliable in combat conditions. The multi-stage improvement program, known as MSIP, was the next major systematic enhancement. Initiated in February 1983, with the first production MSIP F-15C produced in 1985, the program upgraded the central computer, added the programmable armament control set, enabling advanced versions of the AIM-7, AIM-9, and AIM-120 missiles, and expanded the tactical electronic warfare system, with improvements to the ALR-56C radar warning receiver and the ALQ-135 internal countermeasures set. The MSIP-2 portion for the F-15C incorporated the APG-70 radar in the final 43 production aircraft and made the earlier F-15Cs capable of carrying and launching the AIM-120 AMRAAM, which was the central capability improvement the MSIP was designed to provide. The AMR-AAM's fire-and-forget engagement capability transformed the F-15's ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously and without the kinematic constraints of the semi-active Sparrow. The radar is the heart of the F-15's combat capability. and it has been continuously upgraded throughout the aircraft's service life. Understanding this evolution is essential to understanding how the aircraft has remained relevant for more than 50 years. The original AN/APG-63, developed by Hughes Aircraft, was installed on F-15A and B models. It was a pulse Doppler X-band multimode radar capable of detecting and tracking targets at ranges exceeding 100 miles in favorable conditions, and engaging them with radar-guided missiles. Critically, it could look down at low-flying targets against ground clutter using its look-down, shoot-down capability. In 1979, the APG-63 received the Programmable Signal Processor upgrade, becoming the first airborne radar in the world to use software-programmable signal processing. This was a landmark achievement in avionics design, because it meant the radar could be updated with new modes, new weapons compatibility, and new capability improvements through software changes rather than hardware replacement. The investment in the radar architecture paid dividends repeatedly as the software was updated to add capabilities that had not existed when the hardware was designed. The APG-63 with PSP was installed in all F-15C&D aircraft except the final 43, which received the APG-70. The APG-70 radar was developed for the F-15E Strike Eagle and represented a significant improvement in both air-to-air and air-to-ground capability. The APG-70 had a radar data processor with memory 10 times greater than the APG-63 and operated at speeds 4 to 5 times faster, enabling more sophisticated processing of radar returns. It supported multiple new modes including high-resolution ground mapping using synthetic aperture radar techniques, terrain avoidance, and precision tracking of moving ground targets. The APG-70 also introduced a low probability of intercept feature that allowed the radar to sense targets without its emissions being easily detected by enemy electronic support receivers, making the F-15E harder to detect and locate by an adversary with radar warning equipment. The track while scan mode could track multiple air targets while simultaneously maintaining an air-to-ground map, enabling the crew to maintain awareness of both the air threat and the ground target environment during the critical final phases of a strike mission. The APG-63 version 1, introduced in the 1990s as a reliability and maintainability redesign, dramatically improved the reliability of the radar hardware while adding the capability to track 14 targets simultaneously and engage 6 of them. The mean time between maintenance actions was increased by an order of magnitude compared to the original APG-63, which had an average mean time between failure of less than 15 hours. 180 of these radars were delivered to the Air Force. The APG-63 version 2 was the first active electronically scanned array, or AESA, radar fitted to the F-15. An AESA radar uses a fixed antenna panel with thousands of individual transmit-receive modules, each of which can be independently controlled to electronically steer the radar beam across the field of view nearly instantaneously. There are no moving parts, no hydraulic actuators, and no mechanical scanning. The beam can be repositioned anywhere in the field of view in microseconds, enabling the radar to track multiple targets, switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground modes, and support electronic warfare functions simultaneously. The AESA antenna is also significantly harder to detect than a conventional radar because its emissions can be spread across a wide bandwidth and varied in a way that makes them difficult for enemy receivers to recognize as an active radar. 18 F-15Cs received the AESA version 2 as part of an initial upgrade program. The APG-63 version 3 brought AESA technology to a much larger portion of the F-15C fleet, eventually equipping the majority of the surviving F-15C airframes with AESA capability. It provides dramatically enhanced multi-target tracking capability, improved resistance to jamming, lower probability of intercept, and exceptional reliability compared to the mechanically scanned predecessors. The version 3 is also provided to some export customers, including Singapore. The APG-82 version 1 is the most capable radar in the F-15 family and is fitted to the F-15E under the Radar Modernization Program and to the new production F-15E Eagle II. It was originally designated the APG-63 version 4, before receiving its own separate designation in 2009. The APG-82 combines the AESA antenna from the APG-63 version 3 with the processing architecture from the APG-79, which is the radar used on the FA-18EF Super Hornet and the EA-18G Growler, adding radio frequency tunable filters and an improved cooling system that enables simultaneous radar and electronic warfare functions. The result is a radar that can detect, identify, and track multiple air and surface targets at very long ranges while simultaneously supporting the EPAWSS electronic warfare suite, providing the crew with an integrated picture of both radar contacts and electronic emissions across the battlespace. A $3 billion contract awarded to Raytheon covers production of APG-82 systems through 2036. The EPAWSS system replaced the previous tactical electronic warfare system beginning in 2022. The previous system required an externally mounted ALQ-131 jamming pod on the centerline station when active jamming was needed, consuming a store station and adding drag. EPAWSS integrates all electronic warfare functions into an internal, fully digital architecture. It provides all-aspect radar warning receiver function, threat geolocation, integration with the ALE-47 chaff and flare countermeasures dispenser, and active jamming functions that can disrupt enemy radar tracking. The system was described by defense analysts as giving the F-15E electronic warfare capabilities previously associated only with dedicated electronic warfare aircraft. This capability was directly relevant in the 2026 operations over Iran, where Iranian air defense systems had been significantly upgraded and included sophisticated radar-guided surface-to-air missile systems. The F-15's armament suite has evolved continuously throughout its service life. In the air-to-air role, the original weapons were 4 AIM-7F Sparrow radar-guided missiles in semi-recessed fuselage stations, 4 AIM-9L Sidewinder infrared-guided missiles on wing pylons, and the internally mounted M61A1 Vulcan 20mm cannon with 940 rounds in the right-wing root. The Sparrow required the launching aircraft to maintain radar illumination on the target throughout the missile's flight, which significantly constrained the launching aircraft's freedom to maneuver after firing. When the AIM-120 AMRAAM entered operational service in the early 1990s, it fundamentally transformed the F-15's beyond visual range engagement capability. The AMRAAM carries its own active radar seeker and can guide itself to the target without any further input from the launching aircraft after launch. The launching aircraft can immediately maneuver, engage another target, or break away from a threat after firing. The AMRAAM can be fired at multiple targets in rapid succession, and each missile will independently guide itself to its assigned target. The F-15C can carry up to 8 AMRAAMs in addition to 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders for short-range combat and the gun for the closest range engagements. The AIM-9X Sidewinder, the most modern version of the short-range infrared-guided missile, features thrust vector control that allows the missile to engage targets at very high off-boresight angles. When combined with the joint helmet-mounted cueing system, which projects a targeting cursor onto the pilot's visor and tracks the pilot's line of sight, the pilot can designate a target simply by looking at it and fire the AIM-9X without pointing the aircraft at the target. This high off-boresight capability completely changed the calculus of close-range air combat. An aircraft that could previously escape by diving below the nose of a pursuing F-15 can no longer do so against an F-15 equipped with this combination of missile and helmet-mounted sight. The F-15E Eagle II can carry up to 12 AMRAAM-class missiles, plus 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders in various configurations, for a total of 14 air-to-air missiles. This is more than double the air-to-air payload of the F-22 Raptor's internal weapons bays. While the F-22 has significant stealth advantages, the F-15EX can bring overwhelming numbers of missiles to an engagement in situations where stealth is not the primary consideration, such as the large-scale drone and missile intercept missions that have characterized the Iran confrontation. The F-15E's ground attack capability is built around its targeting system and its enormous payload capacity. The aircraft can carry up to 23,000 pounds of ordnance on 11 hardpoints, plus the weapon stations on the conformal fuel tanks. The conformal fuel tanks themselves carry 750 gallons of fuel each and house 3 weapon stations per side in 2 rows, enabling weapons carriage without consuming the underwing storage stations that might otherwise be needed for targeting pods, jamming pods, or additional weapons. The LANTIRN system, low-altitude navigation and targeting infrared for night, was the original precision targeting capability fitted to the F-15E. LANTIRN consists of 2 externally mounted pods carried beneath the engine intakes. The navigation pod contains a terrain-following radar and a wide field-of-view forward-looking infrared sensor that allows the aircraft to fly at low altitude at night, following cues on the heads-up display, threading through valleys and over terrain features while maintaining high speed. The targeting pod contains a narrow field-of-view forward-looking infrared sensor, a laser designator, and a laser rangefinder that enables the crew to precisely identify, track, and designate ground targets for laser-guided weapons. The targeting pod projects its imagery onto the weapon systems officer's display and onto the pilot's heads-up display simultaneously, allowing both crew members to see the target and monitor weapons delivery. The Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod replaced the Lantern in many applications and provides significantly improved imagery resolution, longer detection ranges, enhanced capability against moving targets, and better performance in adverse weather conditions. The Sniper Pod's high-definition infrared sensor can identify targets from much higher altitudes, allowing the F-15E to designate targets while remaining above the most effective engagement zones of shoulder-fired missiles and mobile anti-aircraft systems. This capability was critical in Iraq and Afghanistan, where the threat from ground forces was constant, and the ability to stand off while providing surveillance and targeting support to ground troops was essential. The weapons integrated on the F-15E for ground attack cover virtually every precision and unguided weapon in the American inventory. General-purpose unguided bombs include the Mk-82 500-pound, the Mk-83 1,000-pound, and the Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs. Paveway series laser-guided bomb kits convert these unguided bombs to precision-guided munitions. The Joint Direct Attack munition adds inertial navigation and GPS guidance for all-weather precision attack. The GBU-28, a 5,000-pound weapon with a hardened, penetrating warhead designed to destroy reinforced concrete and deeply buried structures, is one of the most specialized and powerful weapons in the inventory, and is specifically designed for targets like the kind Iran has used to protect its nuclear infrastructure, burying enrichment facilities deep underground under mountains of reinforced concrete. On the first night of the Iraq War in March 2003, F-15ES dropped GBU-28 bunker busters against hardened targets near the H-3 airfield complex in western Iraq. The small-diameter bomb, the GBU-39, is a 250-pound precision weapon with folding wings that extend after release to provide a glide range of over 40 miles when released from altitude. The F-15E can carry up to 36 GBU-39s, 4 per bomb rack unit, enabling the crew to strike as many as 36 separate targets in a single sortie. The AGM-130 powered standoff missile, a rocket-boosted version of the GBU-15 electro-optical glide bomb, provides a long standoff strike capability that was used extensively in both Kosovo in 1999 and in the opening hours of the Iraq War in 2003. The AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile and its extended-range derivative can be carried by the F-15E, providing cruise missile strike capability with ranges well in excess of 500 miles. The F-15EX has been specifically designed to carry weapons as large as 22 feet long and weighing up to 7,000 pounds, enabling it to employ next-generation hypersonic weapons as they enter service. The Weapons Systems Officer in the rear cockpit is one of the most important elements of the F-15E's capability and deserves specific discussion because the role is unique among American tactical aircraft. The Weapons Systems Officer, sometimes called a WISO or WSO, is a fully qualified crew member, not a student pilot. The WSO manages the aircraft's sensors, weapons, navigation, and electronic warfare systems during flight, while the pilot concentrates on flying the aircraft and managing the overall tactical situation. The rear cockpit has its own set of displays and controls, and in the F-15EX, a large area display measuring 10 by 19 inches provides the WSO with comprehensive situational awareness of both the air and ground threat environments simultaneously. The WSO controls the targeting pod, managing the video feed, identifying and tracking targets, and programming weapons with precise coordinates or laser designation. The WSO manages the radar in air-to-ground modes, while the pilot keeps the radar in air-to-air modes, allowing both dimensions of the threat environment to be monitored simultaneously without one crew member having to constantly switch between modes. In the drone and missile intercept role, the WSO and pilot work together to manage the radar picture of incoming threats, sequence the missile inventory, and coordinate with other aircraft and ground-based air defense systems through the Link 16 data link. When two F-15E Strike Eagle squadrons intercepted 70 Iranian drones in a single night in April 2024, that achievement reflected not just the aircraft's sensors and weapons, but the ability of two crew aircraft to sustain the cognitive workload of managing multiple simultaneous intercept engagements over an extended period without losing situational awareness or making targeting errors. The F-15E is currently the Air Force's most capable tactical nuclear weapon delivery aircraft, able to carry up to 5 B-61 Mod 12 nuclear gravity bombs. This nuclear delivery mission, which has been part of the F-15E's portfolio since its early service, adds a dimension to the aircraft's deterrence value that goes well beyond its conventional strike capabilities. The B-61-12 is the most modern nuclear gravity bomb in the American inventory, equipped with a guided tail kit that improves accuracy and allows lower yield employment options that are more flexible than earlier nuclear weapons. The F-15EX Eagle II, which entered service with the Air Force in July 2024, represents the most modern production variant of the Eagle family. It is based on the F-15 Advanced Eagle, a further development of the F-15E that was initially developed for export customers. The Advanced Eagle introduced a revised wing structure that Boeing tested to a service life of 20,000 flight hours, a fly-by-wire digital flight control system replacing the original analog mechanical system, an advanced digital backbone, the APG-82 AESA radar, EPAWSS, the Lockheed Martin Legion pod, with infrared search and track capability, a new cockpit with large area displays for both crew members, and the Advanced Display Core Processor 2 mission computer. The F-15EX incorporates all of these improvements and is optimized for the American inventory and operational requirements. The aircraft is rated for 20,000 flight hours of service life, meaning F-15EXs entering service today could remain operational until the 2060s or beyond, well over 90 years after the first F-15A flew. The Legion pod's infrared search and track sensor provides passive detection of targets through their heat signatures, including potentially low observable aircraft that are difficult to detect with radar. A stealth aircraft that reduces its radar cross-section to near zero still emits heat from its engines, and an infrared search and track sensor with sufficient sensitivity and processing capability can potentially detect and track that heat signature. This makes the F-15EX a more capable counter to stealth platforms than any previous F-15 variant, complementing the active radar picture with a passive infrared picture of the battlespace. The F-15C and D models that formed the backbone of the Air Force's air superiority fleet for decades were retired in 2025, due primarily to structural fatigue from aging airframes that had reached the limits of their service life extensions. Their replacement in the air superiority role, the F-15EX, carries forward the Eagle's combat legacy with a thoroughly modernized platform that will continue to serve alongside F-22s and F-35s as part of a layered American air superiority architecture. Now we turn to the combat history of the F-15 Eagle. It is a history unlike that of any other aircraft in the history of American military aviation, and arguably unlike that of any other fighter aircraft in the world. The F-15 family has compiled a confirmed air-to-air combat record of more than 104 victories against 0 losses in air-to-air combat under American colors, plus additional kills under Allied colors including those of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Israel, bringing the total confirmed record across all operators to over 106 victories. That record has been accumulated across multiple operators, multiple conflicts spanning from 1979 to 2026, and across dramatically different threat environments ranging from close-range turning fights over Lebanon to beyond visual range engagements over Iraq and Yugoslavia. The record has been contested by opposing forces, as we will examine, but not a single enemy claim of an F-15 lost in air-to-air combat has ever been supported by credible physical evidence, wreckage, or verifiable accounts. The F-15's first combat kill came not under American colors but under Israeli ones. Israel received its first F-15A aircraft, which the Israeli Air Force named the Baz, meaning Falcon, in 1976. The Israeli pilots integrated the Eagle with characteristic intensity, and the aircraft was immediately recognized as transformatively more capable than anything they had previously operated. On June 27, 1979, 4 Israeli F-15s were flying top cover for a strike mission against Palestine Liberation Organization targets in Lebanon when 2 flights of 4 Syrian Air Force MiG-21 fishbed interceptors moved in to intercept the Israeli formation. The engagement was brief and decisive. Israeli pilot Moshe Melnik selected an infrared-guided missile, the Israeli-developed Rafael Python III, rather than an American-made Sidewinder, aimed at a MiG-21 and fired. 30 seconds into the engagement, the missile destroyed the Syrian fighter. Moshe Melnik had secured a place in aviation history as the first pilot ever to shoot down an enemy aircraft using the F-15 Eagle. The F-15's combat career had begun. Israeli F-15s continued to accumulate kills through the late 1970s and into the early 1980s as the confrontation with Syria over Lebanon intensified. Between 1979 and 1981, Israeli F-15 Baz aircraft accumulated kills in a series of engagements against Syrian MiG-21s and MiG-23s over Lebanon and the border region. These were not large set-piece battles but frequent, sharp skirmishes that tested the Eagle's capabilities against Soviet-supplied fighters and confirmed its overwhelming superiority in the hands of well-trained pilots operating with the discipline and aggression that characterized the Israeli Air Force. An incident in 1983 demonstrated the structural integrity of the F-15 design in a way that became legendary in aviation circles. On May 1, 1983, an Israeli Air Force F-15D, tail number 957, named Markia Shakim or Sky Soarer, collided with an A-4 Skyhawk during a training exercise. The collision sheared off the right wing of the F-15 roughly 2 feet from the fuselage. Unknown to pilot Zvi Nadivi and his rear-seat crew member, the right wing was simply gone. The F-15 entered a spinning descent. Nadivi, not realizing the full extent of the damage, engaged afterburner to increase speed in an attempt to regain control. What happened next was extraordinary. The large horizontal surface area of the fuselage, the remaining left wing, and the stabilators generated sufficient lift to allow the aircraft to be controlled at very high speed. Nadivi was able to prevent stalling and maintain controlled flight. He made an approach to the runway and landed. The aircraft was traveling at twice the normal landing speed to maintain the necessary lift with the absent right wing. The tailhook was torn off during a failed attempt to use the emergency arresting gear to slow the aircraft, but it finally stopped. Both crew members survived. The aircraft, which had flown its entire landing and approach on one wing, was repaired and returned to service. The incident is documented in the aircraft's own records and became one of the most famous demonstrations of structural robustness in the history of fighter aviation. Then came June 9, 1982, and the most decisive air battle of the Cold War era. Israel's invasion of Lebanon, Operation Peace for Galilee, brought the Israeli Defense Forces into direct confrontation with Syrian forces that had deployed a sophisticated network of surface-to-air missile batteries in the Bekaa Valley of eastern Lebanon. 19 SAM batteries, including SA-6, SA-2, SA-3, and SA-8 systems from the Soviet inventory, formed an integrated air defense network that threatened Israeli air operations over Lebanon. The Syrians had deployed these systems progressively since 1981, and Israel had been studying the problem of defeating them since the devastating losses in the Yom Kippur War of 1973 had demonstrated how lethal Soviet integrated air defenses could be against conventionally operated aircraft. The Israeli Air Force had spent nearly a decade developing the tactics, electronic warfare capabilities, and intelligence preparation needed to destroy this kind of network. The Israeli Air Force launched Operation Mole Cricket 19 on the afternoon of June 9, 1982. The operation was the most complex and carefully coordinated air campaign the Israeli Air Force had ever executed. Intelligence preparation included extensive drone flights over the Bekaa Valley in the months before the operation to map the radar frequencies, scan patterns, and operating procedures of every SAM battery. Remotely piloted decoy drones were used at the opening of the operation to force Syrian radar operators to illuminate their systems, transmitting their exact frequencies and locations. Electronic warfare Boeing 707 jamming platforms disrupted Syrian communications and radar systems. E-2C Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft provided real-time command and control of the entire battle space, coordinating the different waves of attacking aircraft and directing fighter cover to where it was needed. The first wave consisted of 96 Israeli aircraft, including F-15s and F-16s, flying high cover armed with anti-radiation missiles and air-to-air weapons. The second wave, attacking the SAM batteries themselves, consisted of 92 aircraft. The decoy drones went in first, convincing Syrian radar operators that large formations of attack aircraft were overhead, compelling them to activate their systems. Anti-radiation missiles followed immediately, homing on the radar emissions. Electronic jamming degraded Syria's ability to coordinate a response or vector interceptors effectively. In approximately 82 minutes, the Israeli Air Force destroyed all 19 Syrian SAM batteries in the Bekaa Valley without losing a single aircraft to enemy fire. The Syrian Air Force scrambled its fighters to respond, and what followed was one of the largest air battles since World War II, involving aircraft numbers and a duration that had not been seen in any air conflict since the Korean War. Syrian MiG-21s and MiG-23s engaged Israeli F-15s and F-16s across a large battle space. The Israelis, operating with superior radar, superior missiles, real-time airborne command and control from the E-2C Hawkeyes, and the intelligence advantage that the pre-battle preparation had provided, dominated the engagement from the first engagement to the last. By the time the ceasefire took effect the following day, the Israeli Air Force had shot down between 80 and 90 Syrian aircraft, without losing any in air-to-air combat. F-15s were responsible for a very significant portion of those kills, employing AIM-7 Sparrow beyond visual range missiles and short-range infrared missiles in close engagements. The operation is sometimes called the Bekaa Valley Turkey Shoot, and the comparison is apartment. The strategic significance of the Bekaa Valley battle extended far beyond its tactical results. For the first time in history, a Western Air Force had successfully destroyed an integrated Soviet-built surface-to-air missile network in combat. NATO planners had worried for years about the Soviet air defense network in Eastern Europe, which used identical or similar systems. Operation Mole Cricket 19 proved those systems could be defeated with the right combination of intelligence, electronic warfare, precision weapons, and airborne command and control. The Soviet military was shaken. Air and Space Forces magazine reported that when then IAF commander David Ivory met a Czech general in 1991, the Czech officer told him that the Beka Valley battle made the Soviets understand that Western technology was fundamentally superior to theirs, and that in the Czech general's view, the blow to the Beka Valley SAMs was part of the cascade of events that eventually led to Glasnost and the collapse of the Soviet Union. In October 1985, the Israeli F-15 made history again in a mission that permanently expanded the world's understanding of what the Eagle was capable of. On September 25, 1985, members of Force 17, the PLO's elite security unit, hijacked an Israeli yacht off the coast of Larnaca, Cyprus, and murdered the 3 Israeli civilians aboard, allowing them to write down their final thoughts before shooting them. The Israeli cabinet authorized an immediate strike against PLO headquarters in Hammam al-Shat, near Tunis, Tunisia, approximately 280 miles from Israel across the Mediterranean Sea. Operation Wooden Leg, launched October 1, 1985, was the longest combat mission in Israeli Air Force history to that point, surpassing even the Entebbe raid of 1976 in distance from Israeli territory. It was also the first time the F-15 had been used as a bomber in any Air Force. 10 Israeli F-15B and D aircraft, 6 from the 106 Squadron, and 4 from the 133 Squadron, took off from Telephone Naf Air Base at 0700 local time. All the strike aircraft were qualified to employ the GBU-15 electro-optical glide bomb, a precision-guided weapon with a range of 12 to 15 miles from typical delivery altitudes. 6 F-15Ds each carried 1 GBU-15 on the centerline station controlled by the rear seat crew member through a man-in-the-loop data link pod. 2 F-15Cs carried 6 Mk-82 unguided bombs each on their centerline stations to re-attack the ruins of the primary targets. 1 hour into the flight, the formation rendezvoused with 2 Boeing 707 tanker aircraft over the Mediterranean Sea and refueled, each aircraft taking on fuel that brought it to 13.5 tons. The 2 air-spare aircraft returned home while the 8 primary aircraft pressed on. The route was carefully planned to avoid detection by Libyan, Tunisian, and American naval radar systems. The formation maintained radio silence. At 11 in the morning local time, as the weather over the Gulf of Tunis cleared exactly as needed, the F-15s arrived over their target at high altitude with the sun behind them. The attack lasted 6 minutes. The GBU-15 bombs destroyed the PLO chairman's bureau and the Force 17 headquarters. The 2 F-15Cs dropped their unguided bombs on the already burning ruins. Yasser Arafat was not present at the time and escaped unharmed, but the headquarters complex was largely destroyed. Between 60 and 100 PLO members were killed. Tunisian and Syrian air forces were unable to intercept the attacking F-15s. The Israeli aircraft refueled again from the 707 tankers on the return leg and landed safely at Telephone Naf. The mission shocked the military world. F-15s, which the world understood to be pure air superiority fighters, had flown 280 miles over open water to bomb a target and return without loss, using precision-guided weapons that the American Air Force's own F-15E Strike Eagle would not enter service with until 3 years later. The IAF had foreseen the potential of the Eagle's large airframe and exceptional range, and had developed the capability quietly and on its own initiative. Operation Wooden Leg established Israel as the world's leading practitioner of long-range precision air attack and demonstrated that the F-15 was far